Time for an update on 5 previous episodes you've heard in the last year. Hi everyone, it's Jeff. Time to start another exciting week of learning English together. And yes, I mean together. You may think that you're the only ones learning here, but that's not true. I learn things, even things about English, each and every week as I prepare the phrase and now the grammar lesson on the website. So I'm learning right alongside you. Special thanks to JR, as always, the producer extraordinaire. You're listening to episode 190, so that means all the episode resources can be found online at plainenglish.com/190. We're going to do something a little different today. Instead of picking one new topic, I thought I'd update you on previous topics that we've talked about together. The ones I chose for today are Hong Kong, Alex Trebek, the Democrats challenging Donald Trump, Boeing's woes, and the yellow vest protesters in France. Before we start, I wanted to ask if you've signed up for our free email resources. I've been talking about Plain English Plus a lot lately, but we do send out a number of free resources to our email list. Those include an additional word or phrase with every episode, plus links to English articles that I use to prepare the show, and the song of the week every Thursday in case you don't write it down when you hear it. To get all those, just visit plainenglish.com/mail. Before we start, I just want to clarify that I'm not doing this because I'm running out of topics. Quite the opposite. I have an app called Wunderlist on my phone, and I keep a running list of future topics that I want to write about, and there are probably 20 items on that list. But last week, I probably saw 7 or 8 stories about topics we've covered in the past, and none of them warranted another episode. But I'm always thinking about you, all of you out there, and I thought you might want to hear the latest news on some of these topics. So here we go. In Hong Kong, things got worse before they got better, but the government of China appears to have delivered a major concession to the protesters. Hong Kong executive Carrie announced on television that she was formally withdrawing the controversial extradition bill that sparked the protests. She also pledged to increase dialogue with the community and said she would seek an independent review of the political climate. Her offer satisfies perhaps 1.5 of the protesters' 5 primary demands. Some protesters responded that the offer was too little, too late, while others doubted the government's sincerity and ability to conduct a truly independent review itself. Confidence in government is at its lowest level since China took over the sovereignty of Hong Kong in the late 1990s, and the protests, now in their 3rd month, are a thorn in Chinese Premier Xi Jinping's side. They are also harming the city's reputation as a safe place to do business. Both tourism and the local stock market have been down since the protests started. Next up, legendary game show host Alex Trebek is back at work for a new season of Jeopardy. The 79-year-old host of one of America's longest-running television quiz shows, announced in March that he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Trebek said he's on the mend after completing several grueling rounds of chemotherapy. Back in May, he said that his body was responding well to treatment and that many of the cancerous tumors on his pancreas were shrinking much more quickly than doctors had anticipated. He began taping new episodes of the quiz show in July, and the 36th season of Jeopardy began airing on September 9th. We last checked in on the race before the race for the American presidency back in June, when 24 Democrats were all vying for their party's nomination for president. The winner of this race will go head-to-head with Donald Trump in November 2020. Since then, a few minor figures got into the race, but 6 candidates have dropped out. Although many candidates soldier on, these 3 candidates have emerged as the frontrunners, with all the rest fighting for scraps of support. So the 3 leaders are former Vice President Joe Biden, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Sanders is a self-described democratic socialist and is running on a very left-wing platform that promises to cancel student and medical debt. Senator Warren is the populist in the bunch. Her message is that capitalism is broken and favors entrenched interests and big corporations. One of her key issues is breaking up big tech companies. Joe Biden is positioning himself as the voice of stability, having already served 8 years as vice president to Barack Obama. His strongest appeal is that he has the greatest chance to beat Trump in the final round of voting, at least according to his campaign. Under America's absurdly long presidential election calendar, the first states start voting in the primary elections in January, with the final presidential election not until November 2020. It has been a long summer for the aerospace company Boeing. Its 737 MAX jets were grounded in March after a safety defect was discovered. New reports show that the beleaguered jet may not return to the skies until December. Boeing is scrambling to convince international aviation regulators that it has sufficiently modified the flight control computers and trained pilots on the new systems. However, America's Federal Aviation Administration and other regulators recently rejected a briefing in which Boeing had described the changes it had made to its software. Boeing's submission in August had already been delayed several times after the company found additional things it needed to change. There are also questions about whether Boeing is doing enough to train pilots on the new systems. Pilots may need to spend more hours in simulators before being able to fly the MAX again. Individual airlines have had to cancel flights and rearrange their schedules since their fleets are now smaller. If the delays go into the new year, they will affect the holiday travel season possibly leading to higher prices and less choice for consumers. Last up today, French President Emmanuel Macron has his mojo back. Almost a year ago, the French president was on the defensive as protesters wearing gilets jaunes or yellow vests blocked traffic and marched down public streets, demonstrating against new fuel taxes and the high cost of living in general. Macron canceled the majority of his international trips, went on an aggressive listening tour around the country, responded with some modest reforms, and capped off a successful year by hosting the meeting of G7 leaders in a French seaside resort town in August. Macron's listening tour involved 2 million responses to a national survey and 92 hours of public meetings. In response to what he heard, he promised some cuts in taxes, reforms to class sizes for children, and reductions in proposed cuts to hospitals and staff, among other things. The fire that gutted Notre Dame Cathedral helped unite the country around its cultural heritage and a shared national symbol. The French president has fully recovered the public support he lost before the Yellow Vest protests broke out. Honestly, the biggest thing going on in the world and the biggest thing I wanted to update you about is what's going on in Britain. The problem is I write the episodes a minimum of 4 days before they come out. Minimum 4 days. So I'm worried that I'll write something on a Sunday, but by the time it comes out on a Thursday, everything will have changed. We'll have to wait until that situation calms down a little before we do another episode about it here. And by the way, I'd like to include small updates on a more regular basis, maybe at the end of a normal episode. So if there's a story we did in the past that you'd like to hear more about, just let me know by email or WhatsApp. Email is Jeff, Jeff, at plainenglish.com. And you can get me on WhatsApp at plainenglish.com/WhatsApp. Okay. A thorn in your side. This is about as close as I'll ever come to selecting an idiom to discuss on this program. Now, especially if you're in Plain English Plus, you know that I don't think you should be spending a lot of time learning English idioms unless you need them for a test. But this is one that I do think you should know, even if you don't use it a whole lot. A thorn is the part of a rose that can hurt you. There's the beautiful flowering part, the red or white or pink petals, but then there is the sharp part on the stalk. Every rose has its thorn is a song by the 1980s band Poison. You can contemplate that for a moment. A thorn in someone's side is something that is hurtful, painful, harmful, but not, or not yet, deadly. The expression is used to describe the degree of pain you would receive from being jabbed by the thorn of a rose. It's certainly not insignificant. It draws blood, but it doesn't incapacitate you or threaten your life either. A thorn in your side is something that holds you back It's something that distracts you from what you want to do because it is painful. The protests in Hong Kong are a thorn in Premier Xi Jinping's side. They don't threaten his rule, but neither are they insignificant. He can't ignore them, and he isn't, but they are not a mortal threat to his rule. Let me give you a counter-example, something that is not a thorn in a leader's side. Brexit is not a thorn in Prime Minister Boris Johnson's side. Why not? Because Brexit is his whole reason for being Prime Minister. It is a mortal threat to him. It could cause him to either resign or it could cause him and his party to lose in an upcoming election if that's the way they go. So that's the biggest thing going on in Britain. That's the big battle of the day, whereas a thorn in your side is a brief but painful distraction. Now, here is a thorn in the British Prime Minister's side. Joe Johnson was a minister in the cabinet, and he resigned over the actions and positions of his brother, Boris. So the resignation of his brother was a thorn in Boris Johnson's side. Annoying, distracting, embarrassing, yes, yes, yes. But that is not what's going to take him down. Here's another thing about this phrase. It's specific to you. So you would never say, this bad traffic is a thorn in my side, because traffic is a general nuisance. It affects everyone. A thorn in your side is something that affects you specifically. The garage door opener that didn't work the first 20 times I pressed it, that was a thorn in my side until I finally replaced it. The hurricane that hit the Bahamas and glanced off the coast of the U.S. was called Hurricane Dorian, and that reminded me of a book by Oscar Wilde called The Picture of Dorian Gray, which was my least favorite book in school. I mean, my entire time in school, the book I hated the most was The Picture of Dorian Gray. I can't even tell you why, but I hated this book so much. It's a wonder that it didn't turn me off literature entirely. Now that I'm older, I might try reading it again, but I rather enjoy looking back on how much I hated it. Anyway, Hurricane Dorian reminded me of that book, so I went looking for a good quote from The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and here it is. Experience is merely the name men give to their mistakes. I rather like that. Having recently started an online business, our membership site, I can honestly tell you I've gotten a lot of good experience. Today's quote is, experience is merely the name men give to their mistakes, from Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. That's all for today. If you've enjoyed today's episode, you'll love the aforementioned Plain English Plus, our new membership that will help you take your English learning to the next level. With a fast version of this very episode, plus video lessons, Quizlet flashcards, monthly courses, and our famous translated transcripts, Plain English Plus has all the resources you need to improve your listening, writing, speaking, and reading. I spoke about idioms before, I compiled a list of the absolute worst idioms that are taught in English classrooms. I bet you've learned at least 5 of them, if not 10, if not all of them. What's the problem? Nobody uses them. They're rare, but for some reason they stay alive in English classrooms around the world. To find out what they are and to get all the other resources of Plain English Plus, please visit plainenglish.com/plus. JR and I will be back with a new episode, new topic, no more recycled topics on Thursday. See you then.